$100 million couldn't buy her safety, and she discovered that in the most dangerous way possible. Regina Kongwu stood frozen outside her husband's office, the celebratory roses trembling in her hand. The oversized lottery check pressed against her ribs. Just hours earlier she had become a $100 million winner. Certain this fortune would finally earn her power, partnership, and a seat at the table she'd been locked away from. Then came the sounds behind the glass door. A woman's low laughter. Her husband's voice, intimate and unguarded. And something else that made Regina's legal instincts scream danger. Through the glass she could see them. Allison Reynolds in crimson, straddling Choi Kong-woo's lap. Her manicured fingers tracing the dragon tattoo on his neck with disturbing familiarity. But it wasn't the affair that stopped Regina's breath. It was Kong-woo's hand resting on the gun in his desk drawer. His eyes visible over Allison's shoulder, cold and calculating, scanning the warehouse below where a black van had just pulled in. In that moment Regina understood something devastating. The empire she had protected for 5 years, the secrets she had kept, the blindness she had performed, none of it had made her valuable. It had made her disposable. And the man she had sacrificed everything for had never feared losing her because he believed she had nothing of her own. What Choi Kong-woo did next would reveal his true nature completely. And a single lottery ticket, one nobody knew existed, would become the quiet weapon that changed everything. Before the story begins, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and your local time. And if you believe in the power of women who rise from the shadows to claim their throne, don't forget to subscribe. For most of her marriage, Regina lived as a ghost in someone else's empire. From the outside her life looked extraordinary. A penthouse overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. Designer clothes that made her look like art. Invitations to exclusive events where power brokers spoke in careful euphemisms. And at the center of it all stood Choi Kong-woo, commanding, ruthless, untouchable. A man people feared without question. What they didn't see was how carefully Regina had erased herself to exist beside him. She had been a rising star once. 3 years into a prestigious career in international law, fielding offers from firms across continents. Sharp, ambitious, hungry for cases that mattered. Then came the gallery opening in Seoul. The instant recognition when Kong-woo's eyes found hers across the room. The whirlwind month where he made her feel like the only woman in the world. The proposal came with a private jet to Paris and a ring that cost more than her annual salary. The warning signs came just as quickly. His import-export business involved meetings at midnight and phone calls he took in Korean, switching languages the moment she entered the room. The first dinner party where she realized the other wives didn't speak. They decorated. The night she made the mistake of offering her legal opinion on a territorial contract, and the room went silent. Kong-woo's hand on her knee under the table, squeezing just hard enough to bruise. Later in their bedroom he'd been gentle. Almost apologetic. You're brilliant, Regina. But these men, they don't understand brilliant women. Threatens them. You understand, don't you? She understood she was supposed to become smaller. So she did. She learned to smile at the dinner parties and pour tea while men discussed shipping routes that involved payoffs and protection. She stopped asking about the late-night calls, the envelopes of cash, the associates who disappeared and were never mentioned again. She mastered the art of seeing everything and revealing nothing. For 5 years she perfected invisibility. Kong-woo's associates called her the American wife in Korean, assuming she didn't speak the language. She never corrected them. She listened to every conversation, memorized every name, cataloged every suspicious transaction. Telling herself it was insurance. Telling herself knowledge was power. But lately, even Kong-woo seemed to forget she existed beyond the image she projected. He checked his phone during dinner. Came home smelling of unfamiliar perfume. Stopped pretending their marriage was anything more than a carefully curated facade. The loneliness had become unbearable. The kind that made her buy a lottery ticket from a street vendor on a Tuesday afternoon, just to feel like she was doing something, anything for herself. When those numbers aligned, when that $100 million became real, Regina felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope for escape. Hope for power. Hope that finally she would have something Kong-woo couldn't control. Something that would make her indispensable. A true partner in the empire she'd helped build through her silence. She imagined his face when she showed him the check. The respect in his eyes. The way he would finally see her. She never imagined she would walk through his office door and see Allison Reynolds instead. She never imagined the cold recognition in Kongwoo's expression when he spotted her. Not guilt. Not shame. Calculation. The look a man gives a problem he's already decided how to handle. And in that heartbeat, as the roses fell from her hands and scattered across imported marble, Regina realized the terrible truth. She wasn't walking into a new beginning. She was walking into her own execution. The only question was whether she'd see it coming in time to survive. The gallery in Gangnam had been featuring emerging Korean artists, and Regina had gone alone on a Friday evening, desperate for something beautiful in a life that had become nothing but depositions and client meetings. She'd been standing in front of a painting, crimson bleeding into black, when she felt him watching her. Choi Kongwoo moved through the crowd like he owned not just the space but the air itself. Tailored suit that cost more than her monthly rent. A presence that made other men step aside without realizing why. When he stopped beside her, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dangerous. "You see violence," he said in perfect English, studying the painting. "Everyone else sees passion." "Maybe they're the same thing," Regina replied, and his smile was a promise she should have recognized as a warning. 3 weeks later they were in Paris. 6 weeks after that he slipped a diamond onto her finger in a restaurant where she couldn't pronounce anything on the menu. The ring was flawless, massive and cold. Just like the life she was about to enter. The first dinner party happened a month after the wedding. Regina had dressed carefully, excited to meet Kongwoo's business associates. She'd practiced conversational Korean, prepared intelligent talking points about Seoul's economic development. But when she arrived at the private room in the Gangnam restaurant, the other wives were already seated in a separate section, silent and ornamental. She tried to join the men's conversation. Mentioned a recent case about international shipping regulations. Offered an opinion on a contract structure she'd overheard Kongwoo discussing. The room had frozen. One of the older men, Mr. Park, had smiled with all his teeth showing. "Your wife is very American," Kongwoo sighed. In the car ride home, Kongwoo's hand had been gentle on her thigh, his voice softer. "You're brilliant, Regina. But these men built empires before you were born. They don't need legal advice from someone who doesn't understand how things work here. I was trying to help." "I know." He'd kissed her temple and she'd felt the dismissal in it. "Just be beautiful. That's enough." So she learned to be enough. She stopped speaking at dinners unless spoken to. Stopped asking about the envelopes of cash that appeared on their counter. Stopped questioning why associates who displeased Kongwoo suddenly moved to opportunities abroad, and were never heard from again. She poured tea and smiled and became the perfect accessory to his empire. But late at night, when Kongwoo's phone buzzed with messages about problems being handled and cleanups in Incheon, Regina lay awake in their king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling. She'd memorized the names, cataloged the patterns. Her legal mind couldn't help but build the case even as her heart tried to pretend she didn't know what her husband truly was. The loneliness was a physical ache. She'd traded her identity for a ring and a man who no longer saw her as anything more than a beautiful lie. 5 years of that silence. 5 years of becoming smaller and smaller until she was barely there at all. Until a street vendor handed her a lottery ticket and called her eyes lucky. Until $100 million made her believe she could finally matter. Until she walked into Kongwoo's office and realized that mattering to a man like him meant becoming a threat. And threats in his world didn't survive long. The yoga studio in Itaewon was Regina's refuge because nobody knew her there. She checked in under her maiden name, Carter. Rolled out her mat between women who worked in tech and finance, women who talked about their ambitions without lowering their voices. For 90 minutes she could breathe without performing. After class, she walked to the small cafe 3 blocks away where the owner never asked questions and the corner table by the window was always empty at 2 in the afternoon. She ordered the same thing every Tuesday, iced Americano, no sugar, and pretended to read while watching ordinary people live ordinary lives. A businessman arguing on his phone about quarterly reports. A student cramming for exams. A mother bouncing a fussy baby. Simple problems. Normal problems. The kind Regina used to have before she married into an empire built on blood. She was leaving the cafe when she saw the street vendor, an elderly woman selling lottery tickets from a small cart. Their eyes met, and the woman smiled with such warmth that Regina felt something crack in her chest. Lucky eyes, the woman said in Korean, holding out a ticket. You have lucky eyes, dear. Regina bought one. Not because she believed in luck, but because the woman's kindness felt like a lifeline she desperately needed to hold on to. That night, Kang-woo came home after midnight, smelling like cigar smoke and someone else's perfume. He kissed her forehead without really seeing her and disappeared into his study. Regina sat on the bathroom floor, the lottery ticket in her hand, and pulled up the winning numbers on her phone. The first number matched. Coincidence. The second matched. Her heart skipped. By the third number, her hands were shaking so badly she had to set the phone down on the marble tile. She checked again. And again. All 6 numbers. Perfect alignment. $100 million. The number felt absurd. Impossible. For 10 minutes, Regina just sat there, her back against the cold bathtub, trying to process what this meant. She could leave. Buy a house somewhere Kang-woo would never find her. Start over. Reclaim the life she'd abandoned. But then another thought crystallized, more intoxicating than escape. With $100 million, she wasn't just Kang-woo's wife anymore. She was powerful in her own right. She could be his equal. A real partner in the empire she'd spent 5 years protecting. He would finally see her not as decoration but as someone who mattered. Someone valuable. Someone worth keeping. She imagined walking into his office, laying the check on his desk. The surprise in his eyes turning to respect. Maybe even pride. They could build something together now. Something real. Regina stood, straightened her silk robe, and made the decision before fear could poison it. She would surprise him tomorrow. She would buy roses, the red ones he'd given her on their first date. She would walk into his office and show him that she was more than the ghost he'd made her become. He would finally be seen. What Regina didn't know, as she hid the lottery ticket in her jewelry box and climbed into bed beside her sleeping husband, was that being seen by Choi Kang-woo was the most dangerous thing she could ever want. And tomorrow she would discover exactly why. The lobby of Kang-woo's building gleamed with new money and old power. Regina had been here dozens of times, always announced, always expected. Today she wanted surprise. She wanted to see his face transform when she showed him what she'd become overnight. The security guard, Young-ho, recognized her immediately and bowed. Mrs. Choi. Mr. Choi didn't mention you were coming. It's a surprise, Regina said, and her smile felt genuine for the first time in months. The private elevator was mirrors and dark wood. Regina studied her reflection as she rose toward the 40th floor. The red roses from the florist near their penthouse. The oversized lottery check she'd insisted they print, folded carefully in her Hermes bag. Hope written across her face like she'd forgotten how to hide it. She looked like a woman who believed in second chances. The 41st floor was silent except for the hum of expensive air conditioning. Regina's heels clicked against marble as she walked toward Kang-woo's corner office, her heart hammering with anticipation. She would knock first. Be playful. Maybe tease him about. Laughter stopped her cold. A woman's voice, low and intimate. Then Kang-woo's responding murmur, the tone he used to use with Regina in the beginning when she still thought she knew him. Regina's hand tightened on the roses. She should leave. Turn around. Call first like she was supposed to. But something in that laughter, something possessive and cruel, made her step forward instead. The glass walls of his office were supposed to provide transparency, the architect had said. Trust through openness. What a joke. Through the glass, Regina saw her. Allison Reynolds wore crimson like war paint. She was perched on Kang-woo's desk, on Kang-woo's lap, her legs wrapped around him, her fingers tracing the dragon tattoo that curved along his neck. The tattoo Regina had kissed 1,000 times. The one that marked him as someone dangerous. But it wasn't the affair that made Regina's breath stop. It was how Kang-woo held her. One hand on Allison's waist, familiar and claiming. The other resting on the desk drawer where he kept his gun. His eyes were visible over Allison's shoulder, and they weren't closed in pleasure. They were scanning the warehouse visible through the opposite window, where a black van had just pulled up. He was working. Even in this. Regina pushed open the door. The freeze was absolute. Allison turned first, and her smile was a blade, sharp, knowing, triumphant. She didn't scramble away. She stayed exactly where she was, marking her territory. But Kang-woo's face was worse. No guilt. No shame. No panic of a man caught in betrayal. His eyes went flat and cold. Calculating. Measuring threat level. In that microsecond, Regina saw exactly what she'd become. Not his wife. Not his partner. Not even his victim. A witness. Regina. His voice was controlled, almost bored. He didn't move Allison from his lap. You shouldn't be here. For words that meant, you've seen too much. The roses fell from Regina's hands, scattering across imported marble like drops of blood. And in the reflection of his office window, she saw what Kongwu saw. Not a woman with $100 million in hope. A problem that needed to be handled. Kongwu moved with the precision of a man who'd handled far worse surprises than a wife at the wrong time. He lifted Allison from his lap without ceremony, setting her aside like furniture. She smoothed her crimson dress, utterly unbothered, and glanced at Regina with something close to pity. I'll be downstairs, Allison said, her English crisp and American. She collected her purse, pressed a kiss to Kongwu's cheek that felt like a brand, and walked past Regina without another glance. The door clicked shut. Kongwu buttoned his shirt with methodical precision, each motion controlled. He didn't look at Regina. Didn't apologize. Didn't offer the fumbling explanations of a guilty husband. When he finally met her eyes, she saw what she'd been too hopeful to recognize before. This was the man who made people disappear. How much did you see before you came in? His voice was calm. Too calm. Regina's mouth went dry. What? Before you opened the door. How long were you standing there? She thought he was asking if she'd seen more of his affair with Allison. But Kongwu's eyes flicked to the window behind his desk, and Regina's legal training kicked in despite her shock. She turned. The warehouse across the street. The black van with no plates. 3 men unloading long cases that definitely didn't contain office supplies. A 4th man in a suit supervising, someone she'd seen at their dinner parties. Someone Kongwu had called business partner. This wasn't about infidelity. It was about what she'd witnessed happening below. I just got here, Regina whispered, but they both knew it was too late for that to matter. Kongwu crossed the distance between them in 3 strides. His hand found her elbow, and to anyone watching through the glass walls, it would look gentle, concerned. But his fingers pressed against the nerve points he'd once shown her when teaching her self-defense. Back when she thought his knowledge of violence was theoretical. We'll talk at home, he said softly. Not here. Not now. Kongwu. Don't mention this to anyone. His grip tightened just enough to make her gasp. Not your friends. Not the staff. Not even Minjun. Minjun is head of security. The man who handled problems when they couldn't be solved with money or intimidation. The fact that Kongwu specifically mentioned him sent ice through Regina's veins. She was the problem now. I don't understand, she tried, her voice breaking. Yes, you do. Kongwu released her elbow and stepped back, his expression softening into something that might look like concern if he didn't know better. You've always been smarter than you pretended to be, Regina. That's why this is complicated. The words were almost a compliment. Almost affectionate. But what Regina heard was, I know you understand exactly what you saw. I know you're intelligent enough to be dangerous. And that's why I can't let you walk away from this. Go home, Kongwu said. Wait for me. We'll figure this out. Regina bent to pick up the scattered roses, her hands shaking. The lottery check was still in her bag. She'd come here to become his partner, to finally matter. Now she realized she'd made herself into something far worse. A witness who knew too much. In Kongwu's world, those didn't get second chances. They got buried. If you're falling into this dark world with Regina, drop a comment below and let me know. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the explosive chapters ahead. The penthouse felt like a mausoleum when Regina returned. 41st floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that glittered with other people's lives. Everything here was beautiful. Everything here was his. She walked to the master closet, past the rows of designer dresses Kongwu had chosen, past the shoes she wore to events where she was displayed like art. At the back hung her winter coats, the ones she rarely needed in Seoul's mild climate. The black wool Prada from Milan. Their 2nd anniversary trip, back when she still believed in anniversaries. Regina's hands were steady as she found the seam in the silk lining. She'd watched Kongwu hide documents in false bottoms and secret compartments for years. He'd taught her, inadvertently, how to make things disappear. The lottery check slid into the lining like a secret taking root. She stitched it closed with thread from her unused sewing kit, her fingers remembering the precision her grandmother had taught her decades ago. When she finished, there was no visible evidence. Just another expensive coat gathering dust. Regina sat in the living room as twilight bled into night. Surrounded by furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Art that Kongwoo had bought because dealers told him it would appreciate. A life built on money that came from places she'd trained herself not to think about. For 5 years she told herself that staying was easier than leaving. That love could coexist with willful blindness. That she was protected by her ignorance. Today had shattered that delusion. Kongwoo saw her as a liability. And liabilities in his world had short lifespans. But he didn't know about the $100 million. And he never would. The decision crystallized with absolute clarity. The money wasn't hope anymore. It wasn't a ticket to partnership. It was ammunition. Difference. The only weapon she had in a war she hadn't realized she was fighting. Kongwoo returned after 11. She heard his key in the lock, the familiar sound of his briefcase hitting the entry table. He moved through the penthouse like he owned not just the space but the air itself. When he entered the living room, Regina smelled it immediately. Whiskey. Expensive cigar smoke. And underneath, Allison's perfume. Something with jasmine and ambition. He'd been with her. After everything. After the warning. After making it clear Regina's life hung by a thread. Kongwoo set a small velvet box on the coffee table between them. Cartier. Red exterior. The kind of box that held apologies wealthy men gave instead of actual remorse. Open it, he said. Regina did. The diamond bracelet caught the light like shattered ice. Flawless. Expensive. Pulled. Forget what you saw today, Kongwoo said, his voice gentle in the way that meant the words weren't a request. Allison is business. A connection I need for expansion into the European markets. What we have, he gestured between them, is real. You're my wife. The bracelet felt heavy as a shackle when Regina lifted it from the box. She let Kongwoo fasten it around her wrist, his fingers warm against her pulse point. He probably felt her heart racing and mistook it for emotion. It's beautiful, Regina said and smiled. The smile didn't reach her eyes, but Kongwoo wasn't looking at her eyes anymore. He never really had. He kissed her forehead, already pulling out his phone to handle his next crisis, his next deal, his next problem. Regina touched the bracelet. Felt its weight. Understood its message. You belong to me. You're bought and paid for. You'll stay silent because you have nothing of your own. But hidden in the lining of a coat he'd never think to check, she had $100 million that said otherwise. The war had begun. And Kongwoo had made his first fatal mistake. He'd underestimated his wife. Regina had heard the name Jinsu Park whispered at exactly one dinner party 3 years ago. Mrs. Sung had mentioned her while the men smoked cigars in Kongwoo's study. A lawyer who'd extracted a chaebol wife from a marriage everyone said was unbreakable. The wife had disappeared with half the fortune. The husband had been found 3 months later, facing charges he couldn't make disappear. She has connections, Mrs. Sung had said, lowering her voice. Dangerous ones. Yakuza, some say. Regina had filed the name away. Insurance, she told herself then. Now it was survival. The meeting request went through an encrypted email service Regina accessed from a cafe in Hongdae, far from anywhere Kongwoo's people would see her. The response came within an hour. Jogisa Temple. Thursday. 2 p.m. Come alone. The temple was crowded with tourists and believers, the air thick with incense and prayers. Surveillance would be impossible here, both technically difficult and culturally sacrilegious. Jinsu had chosen well. She was waiting in the garden, feeding koi in the pond. Mid-40s, elegant in a way that suggested power rather than wealth. When she looked up, her eyes were sharp enough to cut. Mrs. Choi, she said in English. You're either very brave or very desperate. Both, Regina replied. They walked the garden paths while Regina talked. She revealed everything. The lottery win, the $100 million hidden in her coat lining, the scene in Kongwoo's office, Allison Reynolds, the warehouse operation she'd witnessed. Her voice remained steady even as she described the threat implicit in Kongwoo's grip, the diamond bracelet that was really a collar. Jinsu listened without interruption until Regina mentioned Allison's name. Reynolds. Jinsu's expression shifted. Allison Reynolds? You know her. She's connected to the Murphy Syndicate. Irish mob operating out of Dublin and New York. If she's involved with your husband, he's either expanding into European arms dealing or he's being played. Jinsu stopped walking, her gaze intense. This is worse than a simple affair, Mrs. Choi. You've witnessed the beginning of a territorial war. Regina's stomach dropped. What do I do? You have 3 options. Jinsu counted them on her fingers like a prosecutor presenting a case. Run. He'll hunt you, and $100 million won't buy safety from a man like Choi Kong-woo. Stay weak and compliant. He'll dispose of you the moment you become more liability than asset. She paused. Or option 3, become untouchable. How? Make yourself more dangerous dead than alive. Jinsu's smile was razor sharp. Move the money somewhere he can't access it. Document everything you know about his operations. Names, dates, transactions. Build a dead man's switch. If anything happens to you, everything goes to the prosecutors, the FBI, and his rivals. Make him understand that killing you means destroying everything he's built. Regina thought of the 5 years she'd spent cataloging information, thinking it was paranoia. I already have documentation. Names. Transactions. I've been keeping records. Then you've been preparing for this longer than you knew. Jinsu pulled a card from her pocket. This is my associate in the Cayman Islands. He'll help you move the money. Untraceable accounts. And this, another card, is someone who can help you gather additional evidence. What's your price? 20% of the $100 million when you're free. Jinsu's eyes glittered. And the satisfaction of watching another powerful man learn that his wife was never his property. Regina took the cards, feeling the weight of the decision. This wasn't just planning an escape. This was declaring war. One more thing, Jinsu said. Whatever happens, don't let him know you're afraid. Fear makes you prey. Start acting like the threat you're about to become. Regina touched Kong-woo's diamond bracelet, still cold against her wrist. I already have, she said. And for the first time since walking into that office, Regina smiled. Regina became exactly what Kong-woo wanted. Adoring. Fragile. Dependent. She laughed at his jokes at dinner parties, her hand resting on his arm with practiced affection. She wore the diamond bracelet to every event, letting other wives admire it while she demurred about how thoughtful her husband was. You're so lucky, Mrs. Park said at a gallery opening, touching the bracelet with envy. I am, Regina replied, her smile perfect. And she meant it, but not the way Mrs. Park thought. What Kong-woo didn't see was the recording app running in her designer clutch during his private meetings. The photographs she took of documents he left on his desk when he showered. The way she'd replaced his study camera's memory card with one that uploaded to her secure cloud storage. 5 years of pretending to be decorative had taught Regina exactly how to be invisible while watching everything. She learned the names Kong-woo never said aloud. Senator Kim, who took envelopes and looked the other way. Detective Cho, who provided advance warning of raids. The Chens, who controlled the port in Incheon where shipments arrived without customs inspection. Every name went into her encrypted files. Every transaction was documented. Every weak link identified. Kong-woo grew comfortable again. He stopped watching her so carefully. Started taking calls in her presence, switching to Korean when discussing business, not realizing she'd been fluent since their first year of marriage. The charity gala was his victory lap. 600 guests, Seoul's elite, celebrating his donation to a children's hospital. The irony wasn't lost on Regina. Blood money sanitized through philanthropy. She saw Allison before Kong-woo did. The woman in crimson again, bold enough to attend his wife's event, arrogant enough to think herself untouchable. Kong-woo's expression when he spotted her was carefully neutral, but Regina knew him now. Knew the slight tightening of his jaw meant irritation. Allison wasn't supposed to be here. Should I get her champagne? Regina asked sweetly before he could speak. Kong-woo looked at her, searching for sarcasm. Found only the compliant wife he'd created. That's gracious of you. Regina collected 2 glasses and approached Allison with a smile that could cut glass. Miss Reynolds. How lovely to see you again. Allison's surprise was delicious. Mrs. Choi. I didn't expect. Champagne. Regina offered. My husband speaks so highly of your business arrangements. They both knew what Regina was really saying. I know exactly what you are. But Allison mistook Regina's composure for stupidity. The same mistake everyone made. She accepted the champagne with a smirk, leaning close. Your husband is a remarkable man. So ambitious. This European expansion is going to change everything. Regina's pulse quickened. European expansion. She filed it away. Later, after Kongwoo went to the bathroom, Regina found Allison on the balcony on her phone. She positioned herself behind a column, her own phone recording. The shipment arrives Tuesday, Allison was saying in English. Kongwoo doesn't know about the McCarthy's counteroffer. Once we have his deposit, we deliver to them instead. He'll be too exposed to retaliate without starting a full war. Regina's blood ran cold. Allison wasn't Kongwoo's partner. He was playing him. Using him to start a conflict between syndicates while the Irish mob profited. And Kongwoo, for all his calculating brilliance, had fallen for a beautiful woman who told him what he wanted to hear. Regina slipped away, her mind racing. He had the recording. The evidence of Allison's betrayal. She could show Kongwoo could save him, could finally prove her value. Or she could let the dominoes fall. That night she sent an anonymous message to the McCarthy syndicate. Just enough information to make them suspicious. Just enough to make them check whether Kongwoo was really the partner he claimed to be. The first domino tipped. And Regina watched it fall with the champagne glass still in her hand, smiling. The first crack appeared on a Wednesday. Kongwoo's phone rang during breakfast, and Regina watched the color drain from his face as he listened. He left without finishing his coffee, without kissing her goodbye, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. By Friday, the news reached even Regina's careful ears. A shipment intercepted in Busan. 30 million in merchandise seized. The Chens were demanding explanations Kongwoo couldn't provide. On Sunday, Mr. Park, the one who'd called Regina American at that first dinner party, was found in his car at the bottom of the Han River. Accident, the news said. Everyone who mattered knew better. Kongwoo stopped sleeping. He paced their penthouse at 3 a.m., drinking whiskey and making calls in rapid Korean. Regina heard him snarling about betrayal, about leaks, about finding whoever had talked. She stayed small, quiet, brought him coffee and said nothing. But she saw the paranoia taking root. Saw him watching her with new suspicion. Tuesday night she made the mistake of asking if everything was okay. Kongwoo moved faster than she'd ever seen. One moment she was at the kitchen counter. The next, his hand was around her throat, slamming her against the refrigerator hard enough to rattle the bottles inside. Have you been talking? His face was inches from hers, his eyes flat and deadly. This was the man who made people disappear. Who have you spoken to? Regina couldn't breathe. Couldn't answer. She saw her death in those eyes. Saw him making the calculation about whether she was worth keeping alive. He released her suddenly and she collapsed against the counter, gasping. I'm sorry, he said, but the apology was mechanical. He was already thinking past her, through her. This is for your protection. That night Minjun arrived with 2 other men. They waited in the living room while Kongwoo spread documents across the dining table. A post-nuptial agreement, he explained, his voice calm again. Controlled. Given the current instability, we need to protect our assets. This transfers everything to a Trust 1 control. Gives me power of attorney. For your safety. Regina looked at the documents. Recognized the language. She'd seen contracts like this before. The ones Kongwoo made people sign right before they disappeared. The men in the living room weren't there for her protection. They were there to handle her if she refused. Regina picked up the pen. Held it over the signature line. Felt Kongwoo's relief before it even happened. He'd won, he thought. She was still the compliant wife who did what she was told. She set the pen down. No. The word landed like a gunshot. Kongwoo's expression shifted from relief to confusion to something dangerous. Regina. I know about the McCarthy shipment, she said, her voice steady despite the fear threatening to choke her. I know what Allison Reynolds really is. I know about the Incheon warehouse, the Chens, Senator Kim, Detective Cho. I know about Park's body in the river and the 3 associates who relocated to Japan. Kongwoo went very still. I've documented everything. Names, dates, transactions, recordings, photographs. It's all stored somewhere you'll never find it. Regina stood, feeling the power shift for the first time in 5 years. And if anything happens to me, If I disappear, if I have an accident, if I sign this contract under duress, everything goes to the FBI, the Korean prosecutors, and every rival you've ever made. You're bluffing. Am I? Regina smiled, and it wasn't the compliant wife's smile anymore. You taught me to be invisible, Kangwoo. You just never wondered what I was doing while you weren't looking. In the living room, Minjun shifted, waiting for orders. Kangwoo stared at his wife like he was seeing her for the first time. And Regina realized something beautiful. He was afraid of her. The silence in the penthouse stretched like a blade against skin. Kangwoo's eyes moved from Regina to the unsigned contract to Minjun waiting in the doorway. Calculating. Always calculating. You've been planning this, he said slowly. Not a question. An accusation wrapped in something that might have been admiration if it weren't laced with fury. For longer than you knew, Regina replied. You taught me how to watch. How to listen. How to disappear while standing in plain sight. I was an excellent student. The $100 million. His voice was flat. You won the lottery. She hadn't mentioned the money, which meant he'd been having her followed, checking her movements. Regina felt a flicker of satisfaction. He'd been watching her hide what he couldn't find. Already moved, she said. Offshore accounts you'll never trace. Properties in countries without extradition treaties. I've built something you can't touch, Kangwoo. Just like you built your empire. I'll find it. You won't. Regina pulled her phone from her pocket, showed him a single photograph. Allison Reynolds at the charity gala mid-phone call. Because you've been too busy being played by her. Kangwoo took the phone, his expression darkening as he listened to the recording. Allison's voice. The McCarthy counteroffer. The betrayal laid bare. She was working with Jin-Soo Park, Regina continued. Seduced and turned months ago as insurance. Every secret you told her, every weakness you showed, it all came back to me. You were so busy watching your enemies you forgot to watch your lovers. The phone cracked in Kangwoo's grip. So here's what happens now, Regina said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. You divorce me quietly. Split the legitimate assets 50-50. I keep the offshore accounts in my evidence. You keep your empire, what's left of it. Or, she paused for effect. I release everything. The FBI gets your financial crimes. Korean prosecutors get your political corruption. The McCarthys get proof you were planning to betray them. The Chens get evidence you've been skimming. Every enemy you've ever made gets a weapon. You'd burn yourself too. I'm already burned, Regina said. You made sure of that the moment you decided I was disposable. But I'll survive the fire, Kangwoo. Will you? He studied her for a long moment. The wife he'd made invisible. The decoration he'd underestimated. The problem that had become unsolvable. 3 days, he finally said. You have 3 days to disappear. After that you'll what? Hunt me. I have allies now. People who make you look like a street dealer. She collected her pre-packed suitcase from beside the door. She'd been ready for this moment all along. And if I die mysteriously, if I disappear, if anything happens that even looks suspicious, the dead man's switch activates. You taught me that term, remember? At the dinner party 2 years ago. Regina walked past Minjun without looking back. Heard Kangwoo's sharp order in Korean, let her go. She'd won. But victory tasted like ash and possibility and something else she couldn't name. 3 months later, in a penthouse in Singapore with a harbor view and a new name, Regina sipped wine and watched the surveillance footage on her laptop. Kangwoo's business partners abandoning him. His legitimate ventures being investigated. His empire fracturing exactly the way she designed. He tried one last move, hired someone to find her. Jin-Soo had handled it with characteristic efficiency. Regina touched the laptop screen, tracing the image of the man she'd once loved. The man who'd taught her that power meant making yourself untouchable. She wasn't free from his world. She'd become something more dangerous. A queen with her own territory. Her own network. Her own rules. And someday when the time was right she'd return to Seoul. Not for revenge. She already had that. For something he could never understand. Dignity. The game, Regina thought as she closed the laptop and smiled at the skyline, had only just begun. And that's where Regina's journey takes her. What did you think? Drop a like if this story had you on the edge of your seat and comment below to let me know where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. But this is just the beginning. The darkness holds many more secrets, and I have another thrilling story waiting for you. Click on the next video to discover what happens when fate brings dangerous souls together. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. See you in the shadows.